Thank you so much. So I'm delighted to talk a little bit about the role of the patient voice in research and our upcoming work with the James Lind Alliance. So most of you are probably familiar with the traditional role that patients have played in research, whereby it's quite a unidirectional relationship and patients are recruited once funding has been secured and a protocol has been devised. And while patients still have the opportunity to benefit from participating in research, and written informed consent remains one of the core tenets of research, this is lacking in certain areas. It's unsatisfactory for a number of reasons. Firstly, research needs to have the potential to benefit patients, and at the very least should do no harm. Research needs to be acceptable and tolerable to patients, and we've heard time and time again how research protocols that have a prohibitive number of visits or very cumbersome or invasive procedures as part of their protocol are less likely to recruit and subsequently have less of an impact. And as research funding can often come from government bodies or charitable bodies, research needs to have the potential to impact the wider public and needs to be acceptable to a broad range of patients and public. So we've moved very much away from the idea of enrolling patients at the last minute to having patients involved in the how and why research is done and incorporating them at the stage of protocol development. And this has been termed public and patient involvement, which is research that is done with or by members of the public rather than to, for or about them. And this has been a phrase that's been championed by a number of patient groups and charities, which is nothing about us without us, which we've heard yesterday. And nobody incorporates the idea of patient and public involvement more so than the James Lind Alliance. The James Lind Alliance is a publicly funded body that was established in 2004, and in the nearly 20 years since it's been established, it has organised over 50 priority setting partnerships. And a priority setting partnership is internationally recognised as a gold standard by which important questions that need to be answered by research are identified. It's a strict method of bringing clinicians, patients and their representatives together to identify evidence uncertainties and unanswered questions in ways that all three agree are the most important that affect a community affected by any particular condition. They then use these results to generate a top 10 list of research priorities, and researchers and funders are encouraged to answer these questions as priorities in research, so that people who are impacted by conditions every day are the ones that benefit from research. And we're delighted to say that we have recently paired with the James Lind Alliance and we will be launching a priority setting partnership for research uncertainties and research priorities for adults with type 1 diabetes in early June. As I mentioned, the JLA is an extremely well-established body. It has very robust methods and protocols. These are all freely available online if anyone has a burning passion to read them. But they have an extremely robust set of procedures that they expect you to follow as part of identifying your priorities. I've summarised it down just to elaborate on where we are in our process. So the first step is to gather groups of patients, carers and clinicians to form a steering group. We have a steering group of 12 members. I'm delighted to say that we have 5 patients and patient representatives on that body, and we have a further 3 representatives from charitable bodies. All of the clinicians who work as part of our steering group, many have research backgrounds and have worked in research in the past, but all are practicing clinicians who see adults with type 1 diabetes in their day-to-day life. We as a steering group then design a survey where we ask people to submit their unanswered questions or their priorities for type 1 diabetes. And through our partner networks and our social media outlets, we will be disseminating this survey to as many people impacted by type 1 diabetes, clinicians and the families of those affected by type 1 diabetes as possible. And again, a core tenet of the James Lind Alliance is that we outreach to a large community, that we reach people whose first language isn't English. For the instance of type 1 diabetes, we're working with sight loss charities to communicate with people who have visual loss for whom a written survey mightn't be that convenient. So representation and a strong voice from patients impacted are really, really important. Once we have the survey filled out and the data collected, we will summarise these questions and categorise them. We will then check them against existing evidence to ensure that they haven't already been answered. And then we will be reissuing surveys where we put the questions and the priorities we've identified to the community impacted by type 1 diabetes and ask them to rank them down to the top 10. And I suppose the question is then, well, of course, what do you do with these top 10 priorities? It's all very well to have them. But the JLA has a very strong track record of directing these questions towards funding bodies and researchers. So to put this into context, in 2017, the James and Alliance did a priority setting partnership for type 2 diabetes, and of their 10 questions, 3 are now undergoing large-scale trial investigations that have secured funding from either charitable or government organisations. And these are very impactful patient priorities. So, for example, dietary interventions in type 2 diabetes, the barriers that limit medication intensification in type 2 diabetes, and peripheral neuropathy. So it's very clear how all 3 of these are extremely patient-centred. The role of the patient, I think I've made it clear how involved they are in our steering committee, but it really can't be overstated how important it is to have a constant voice of somebody who's aware of the day-to-day challenges of living with any condition, but of course in this instance type 1 diabetes. They're well represented on our steering committee, and we have a broad range of people. We have some very experienced patients, but patients who've been involved in research before as participants in randomised controlled trials and who've been patient representatives on boards before. We also have people who've been living with type 1 diabetes for a very long time, who've never participated in research, but have really seen the whole scope of diabetes treatment back from the time when insulin was drawn up in glass vials now to the era of insulin delivered by pump. So we have a huge breadth of experience. Many of our steering committee feel that they have extensive knowledge they want to put to use. They want to make a difference in diagnosis, treatment, and very interestingly in how service is delivered. They feel a sense to give something back, and they want to challenge assumptions in healthcare. The benefits for the patients of being involved in a PSP can really very easily be extrapolated to the benefits of having public and patient involvement in research. It makes research more relevant, acceptable, understandable, and it provides a better experience to healthcare by making it more patient-centred. Quotes from people who've been involved in the JLA, and I wasn't expecting the screen to be so far away, so I'm probably going to have to squint, but patients felt that they had a sense of being empowered and that they felt they were able to achieve more than they ever could at the time that they were first diagnosed with their illness. In the interest of time, I won't read out the clinician statement, but it also, people who've been involved have said it made it feel like a shared vision. So I think it's very clear how both patients and clinicians benefit from taking part in this kind of research. So our vision for the future is to use our all-Ireland-wide network of CRF hospitals and research bodies to improve the care of people with diabetes throughout Ireland, to deliver something that is patient-focused, that we can confidently stand up and say that patients have prioritised these and that we can give a very patient-centred approach to diabetes care in the future. Thank you very much.